medically understood.
Hey there, folks. Mark Edwards here, and this is the Ultraviolet Podcast. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Alex Harker, also known as Harker the Storyteller on YouTube. Harker is a leftist video essayist who's made a bunch of really great videos on a whole bunch of different stuff, including Catholic ethics and how incorrect they are when it comes to gender identity and human sexuality, as well as videos on advocacy for transgendered people and pointing out just how close to fascism the ideology of many TERFs and gender-critical folks are, and a whole bunch of other really awesome stuff that we talk about in the interview itself. In the interview, we talk about Catholicism and Christian ethics. We talk about how those are similar to and intertwined with authoritarianism in general, and specifically how authoritarianism uses control over people's bodies and their sexual identity and their gender identities as a vector for control of the person themselves. We talk about the rise of fascism within the Anglosphere over the past 30 years, from the fall of the Berlin Wall to 9/11 to the global financial collapse to the war on terror and a whole bunch of other dominoes that have led us to the present moment. That is the subject of a video that Harker is presently working on and which I am very much looking forward to and hopefully should be out very soon at the time that this video is released. If it is, you should absolutely go check it out because it sounds like it's going to be an absolute fucking banger. So looking forward to that. After that, we talk about what individuals can do in a response to that growing right-wing authoritarianism in the world. Specifically, what you can do to become a more embedded member of your community, to become more active within your local community and with your neighbors, and how to interface with leftist praxis and bring it into your actual everyday life. All in all, it was a really great conversation. I had a great time. Harker's a great person, and I really like talking to them. As far as content warnings go, we talk about a lot of really heavy stuff: racism, transphobia, homophobia, fascism, genocide, and there's a mention of sexual assault. So pretty heavy stuff. If that is going to cause you psychic damage and you're a regular listener, you know the deal. I'm not going to take it personally if you decide to skip this one because of that. For everybody else, I will not keep you from the interview any longer, and I now give you Harker, the Storyteller. All right, Harker, the Storyteller, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to chat.
And Harker got up extra early this morning to come talk with me, and I truly appreciate that because I know how absolutely fucking horrible it is to get up early in the morning when you don't want to. So
murderous, honestly. Worse than an employer. How dare you?
And you said that you're currently employed as a school teacher. Is that accurate?
No. So I'm on my way to being employed as a school teacher.
Okay.
I'm going through the recruitment rounds and all of that stuff, but I've just finished my qualification as a Master's of Teaching.
Okay. Congratulations.
So, it's been very exciting. I did really well on my last bit where I just got to say that capitalism is why teaching doesn't work very well. So to be good teachers, we need to overthrow capitalism. Which I apparently argued convincingly.
Yeah. I mean, like, you will not hear a counter argument from me. What are your, I guess, what grade level will you teach?
I'll be teaching high school. So in the Australian system, it runs primary school, which is K to 6, then high school, which is 7 to 10 for mandatory high school, and then optional high school is year 11 and 12, and that's where you get into university.
Interesting. Okay, it's a little different than we do it here, but functionally the same. So you, for folks that are not familiar with you and your content, Harker is a soon-to-be teacher, but also currently a YouTuber who makes very interesting lefty content, dissecting a whole bunch of different stuff from different angles. And I like all of your videos. It's a very eclectic, different subjects, but I like the way that you approach them in this like very methodical, like we're going to dissect the subject and come at it the way that you do. Um, but my personal favorite, or one of my personal favorites, was the video that you did on Catholicism, and I did enjoy that very much.
That was a really interesting one. So while I've been studying my masters, I ended up stumbling into a Catholic university where I did a semester or so of religious education kind of work. So how to teach religious education. Now I am aggressively secular, but I thought it would be a really interesting stretch of my philosophical muscles to engage with theology, which is a different epistemology, a different way of thinking about the world than most approaches I've taken to thinking about the world. And then straight away, I ran into the hard wall that I am trans and very gay. And so I needed to come.
Block in
Yeah,
Catholicism, is it?
a little bit. So I had to kind of. I felt the need to argue my case in that setting for my right to be there and my right to be treated as human.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the initial notes that I took away, and then, well, such things run around my brain a bit. It was coming up to Christmas, a very, very Christian holiday in a lot of ways, and it made me want to say something more about the way that the way that religious education works, the way that people have abused that, and more importantly, the way that systems have abused religious education, kind of from students, children, up to from the pulpit, in the church, because they are, even on their own merits, wrong about their beliefs.
Yeah, and so when you say even on their own merits, do you mind expanding on that a little bit? Like specifically what that means, like within the context of Catholic theology, how they're incorrect?
Yeah, sure. So Catholic theology is multifaceted. It has been, in development for about 1400 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's been kind of cyclically built and rebuilt based on the needs of the time and the whims of the Pope. The core teaching that runs through all of Catholic theology, that I don't think most people kind of could disagree with, and in fact predates most Catholic theology to more, I guess, orthodox, more original, more original Christian ideas, is the Beatitudes, which is the Sermon on the Mount. It's Blessed are the meek. It's the scene from Life of Brian where the people in the distance can't hear him properly. And if you take those core tenets, which are the pillar that the Catholic Church professes to hold itself up by, you cannot, in another breath, denigrate queer people, or sex work, or even tax collectors. It's an argument that is made that is counter to the foundational idea. It'd be like saying, I'm a communist, therefore markets are amazing and we should go for markets all the time. It's like that contradicts the core stated belief. And that's kind of that's where I'm approaching it from.
Yeah, I would for those who may be secular, I also am aggressively secular. But for those who have not at least read, say, the Sermon on the Mount, I would, Jesus drops some bars. It's pretty. I think most people can vibe with that particular bit of uh, instruction, and it is ostensibly the foundation for most of modern Christendom, and also the lessons contained within it are the things that are generally the least adhered to, which is, if you actually were to live by Christ's example, you'd
Yeah.
basically be an anarcho-communist hanging out with sex workers. Like,
So essentially, I am living the Christ message as the anarcho-communist who spends all my time hanging around with sex workers and teaching people. Like
there you go.
that's my
Yeah.
vibe. I am in fact
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
My
I was
own
even
personal Jesus. Yeah.
look. I was even born right next to the Jordan River.
Nice.
It all vibes together, really.
All right, I'll take it. Well,
There we go. Harker the Storyteller, the next Jesus.
all right. That's
You know,
what I'm going to title the podcast. Actually, is
there we go.
Jesus 2.0. Um,
Merch
I
opportunity is all I'm seeing here.
so I actually got kind of into not super deep into Catholicism, but I did go down like a hyper fixation rabbit hole with it at one point where I was trying to trace the Christian ethical position on abortion back through like the theology. And I wound up reading a fair bit of uh, I'm blanking on the guys. The big like Saint what's his name? The founder of basically modern.
Oh, of natural law theory. Saint,
Yeah,
what's his name?
I want to say
Yeah.
Thomas Aquinas, but that's like
Yes,
400
that's
years
it.
later.
No, it's
Was it
Aquinas.
Aquinas?
Aquinas
Okay.
is natural law, babe. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and Aquinas, and oddly enough, there's like a weird blend of like Middle Roman Stoicism in a lot of like it found its way into that whole milieu of like because like the early Christians were effectively like swimming in Middle Roman Stoicism, and that made its way into a lot of their love not the body and its desires and all of the other things that I think, as you
Yeah,
point
all the
out in your
weird shit.
video, yeah, yeah, the weird shit where like you're not allowed to enjoy being human, like
Mm.
that traces a lot to like I think Aquinas was very heavily influenced by the middle to late Stoics, and that shows in his writing. And it's just it's so bad for you, like it's just
It,
not good stuff.
it really is. Like, if one wants to live the whole and uh, live the good life, whatever that looks like, denying the body base, like its basic wants, is bad. Actually, like when you are thirsty, you should drink water, my dudes. When you are hungry, you should eat. When you are horny, well, like, if you can fuck, then do it. But if you can't, then you've got a hand, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Actually,
just the sensations of the body, which have been so directly countermanded by an enormous number of religious authorities, are good sensations for how, like, good things to understand for how to stay alive and live the good life.
mhm.
Sometimes your brain will lie to you, but by and large, the feeling of whatever it is, isolation or loneliness, can even be a useful feeling because it's like, oh, I should go talk to someone.
Yeah.
There's my soapbox.
No, it's a soapbox I share. I actually see some value in like Stoic teaching, but I don't like the way that it made its way into the absolute like you must not under any circumstances indulge in your bodily desires or earthly desires. It was Saint Augustine who was a big influence on Aquinas, is
Mm,
who I was thinking of earlier. I don't know
yeah,
how
yeah.
much. I don't know how much Aquinas was directly influenced by Stoicism, but I know Augustine was heavily influenced by them, and he influenced Aquinas. But
Right.
um, just getting that out there so I don't get angry comments from like the
Yeah, no, fair.
people. um,
People who know
but
this stuff better than you or
yeah,
I
which
are.
I am not a religious scholar, but I read like 3 books, and um, but I think there's utility, and like there is a certain amount of merit to discipline and like self control and those things, but not to the extent that it is implemented in, and at times very often weaponized by particularly organized religion, which functions as like this high control group. And it really is just a mechanism of social control to enforce cohesion. And I think that's largely what like the Catholic Church is, for instance. And that's, I, I could be wrong about this, but I feel
Hmm.
like if you were to look at smaller religious groups that are more like community and family based, you would find less of that strict imposition on bodily autonomy and desire than you would in like large hierarchical structures that are largely, or for instance, in the Catholic Church, largely was intertwined with and at times functioned like a state.
I mean, absolutely, the Catholic Church functioned as basically as the UN or as the EU for Europe for a
Mm-hmm.
long time, but rather than member states coming together, it was dictated by fiat, by God, really. Um, the the issue I have that kind of runs through all of my work where it touches religion is um, the denial of those impulses, the denial of like the so-called discipline that they push in the Catholic Church, which extends into the priesthood with vows of celibacy, extends to their demands for what queer people do, which is to become celibate. Um, it it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts them,
Mm-hmm.
and it also kind of like it is a process of harm. And maybe it's because it's imposed from outside. Like self discipline is great, useful, but as soon as you've got an imposition of an imposition on your liberty, really, that's where I draw a really hard line.
Mm-hmm.
An imposition on your liberty that is for no benefit other than to show that they can impose on your liberty like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's actually a really good distinction. There, the difference between self-discipline and something you take on yourself versus something that is put upon you to do in order to be a member of your culture or society.
Mm.
Like there's nothing wrong with a monastic or aesthetic lifestyle if that is how you want to live, and I can
Yeah.
certainly see that being appealing to some number of people who find peace or religious conviction or like they get something out of that. But where it
It's got to
becomes,
be what you want,
yeah,
what you have chased. As soon as
yeah,
it's, yeah,
yeah, like,
as soon as it's,
I think it's just a facet of control, like you said. It's don't do the thing that you want as a ultimately, yada yada yada, as proof that you are a supplicant of me and that I am in control of you.
I mean, this is something one of my earlier works, The Revolution Fucks, spoke about quite a bit
Yeah.
because I mean that's where I was approaching that from as well. But rather than looking at religious teaching, I was looking at Orwell,
Mhm.
1984,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and marriage law and where queer advocacy kind of functions in society. Um, that was another. I'm very proud of that video. But the
Yeah.
the thesis in 1984 is that through control of sexuality, the party can gain and reveal and just kind of demonstrate a greater degree of control over people. And look, Orwell was aggressively heterosexual in a way that I find distasteful. But look, I'm fine with the straights as long as they don't try and shove it down my throat.
Yeah.
But it's telling that resonates so strongly to the degree that the film adaptation has the Eurythmics song "Sex Crimes" as their like theme for the whole dang thing. The free expression of sexuality, which includes the free abstention from sexuality, or the freedom to not engage in sexuality, is a personal liberty that you see authoritarian systems, and especially fascistic systems, control and control and control. You know, Nazi Germany with the attempt to, with the book burning of the Institut for Sexualwissenschaft. I can't do German. The Sex Institute. They burned the books, which is where transness was being researched, where same-sex attraction or homosexualities were being researched, and the rights were being advocated for. I actually have no idea about Italy's approach to queerness, but I know that in Spain, with the Franco regime, again, like this viciousness against anything that was less than masculine in their particular ideal. And it's something that comes up time and again. Even looking to just authoritarians as opposed to fascists like the Soviet government, there is a weirdness around queerness, and I hate it. I hate it because it is an expression of the most personal control, and then you have to think, why do these massive institutions like the Catholic Church reach so deeply into the human experience to control these these experiences that should be as humanly experienced as I need to breathe, I need to eat. That's that's the frustration.
Well, no, I mean it's a valid, absolutely valid frustration. I think it is an element of control. Like if you can control someone's sexuality, be it denying them a mode of sexual expression or forcing a particular mode of sexual expression upon them, you've done the practical thing of, number one, control. You have control over social reproduction, which is huge for any authoritarian movement, but you've also imposed yourself on them in a way that is almost uniquely personal. Like the system, like be it the state, be it the church, be it whatever, if it has control of your sexual identity, your sexuality, your gender, it has control over a huge aspect of you as a person. Like there's very, there's not, there are very few things that are as huge to human beings as those things. And if you can get a hold of those, you've got a good hold on the person. And I think that's one of the, I think that's one of the reasons why sexuality and gender are very often, and you see this, you saw it in the early fascists, you see it today with TERFs who are all but in name I like to say,
trans exclusive reactionary fascists
yeah,
is the term that I've developed for them.
I've been, I've started saying, scratch a turf and a fascist bleeds,
Yeah.
is another, but yeah, those are wedge issues, even today. And it's one of the reasons I'm not a class reductionist is because or not frequently, but they will use anything that can make, so, a lot of the straights, which I count myself among, but I'm going to throw my people under the bus here. A lot of them are uncomfortable by things that are not like them. And it is easy to divide the working class from itself along gender and sexual lines. And if you can do that, the next step is race. The next step is everything else. And, you know, the poem goes, first they came for the socialists. Well, first they came for the transgender people. And then they got
Yeah.
the socialists. It's just the socialists didn't mind when they came for the transgender people. And that's why that's not the first line of that poem.
That's exactly the case. It's all right. So there's two things I want to hit up out of what you've said there, because the first is talking about forced sexuality and enforcing sexuality, which I think is all right. So it is reductive to say that society forces certain sexual expressions in the same way that rape forces a certain sexual expression.
Mm-hmm.
But as someone who has been victim to both,
Mm-hmm.
there is definitely symmetry. It's not the same, but it rhymes. And the the process of a sexual assault is the ultimate expression of power over somebody else. You are controlling a body, you are controlling a mind, and you are controlling, for lack of a better word, a soul in that process. And that is, I think, something that has been learned by especially authoritarian regimes, but just by a society of control, which is what we live in today and now. That's the first kind of big swipe I want to take there. Sorry to drop a reference to something so horrifying out of the blue.
We'll do content warnings at the beginning. Just
Yeah.
say what you want to say. I appreciate it. We'll front load it with content warning, and then you just speak freely.
And then the other element is, come on, brain. You were very fired up to talk about both of these things.
The division of the working class from itself.
The wedge. Yeah. So there is a myth that exists that the working class is bigoted, small-minded, shitty, etc. to minorities. And while they can be, it's not necessarily the case. And the people you see much more than the working class being shitty to other people isn't the working class, it's the middle class.
Yes.
So this is something you see in in the spaces where fascist movements rise up, it is the middle class that is targeted. It is, it's not the earning class. The capitalist class will do whatever they want, as they always do in all capitalist systems, like fascism. And it's the middle class that you mobilize to attack the working class, to attack the ruling elites, whoever they may be construed to be, whether that is, actual people in control of large amounts of capital, as can be the case, or if that is, the gays, the transes, the Jews, the whatever it is. You mobilize the the people as a fascist. You mobilize the middle class as a fascist to attack the enemy, whoever the enemy is. And you choose who the enemy is to a greater or lesser degree of legitimacy. That's it's so there is, it's a pervasive myth that it's the working class people who kind of rise up as the core of the masses, as Hannah Arendt would put it. So the core of the fascistic drive. It's not a working class bigotry. Working class bigotry exists, but it is both less important, less prevalent, and less impactful than middle class bigotry. And in fact, like, look, when I go and hang out with a bunch of working class people where I live, where I am, and as someone who, I mean, I've traveled between working, middle, and student classes in my time so far. I can tell you that the people who are the most bigoted, like, the working class may not have the academic terms to fuck around with, though by and large these days they do. We do understand what's going on. But even if they're lacking the best terminology, if you're working, they're on board, right? Like they're helping out. You're helping out. It's all a thing together. I can roll up to a country town, a rural country town here in Australia, and I can tell you that the people who will fuck me up are not the people who are out on the out refencing the paddock, out and about rewelding the boilers. They're the business owners, the ones who will incite the hatred. It's the the petty bourgeoisie that are almost always actually the fuckers. And the working class, like, the attempts to divide the working class are undermined essentially by the presence of camaraderie, which is a necessity to survive working under capitalism.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to touch on the thing that you said at the end there is, I think very often when we talk about working class people, which I've spent a huge chunk of my life around as well, people mistake ignorance for explicit bigotry, and they are not the same thing. If somebody lacks the academic terminology, they're going to say things that might sound sideways, but if you actually interrogate their feelings, very often you'll find somebody who is legitimately an ally. They just don't spend all their time on Twitter or buried in social science journals, right? Versus somebody who has the actual academic language and who is being explicitly bigoted and covering up their bigotry with that same language, which would be, pretty much all the TERFs and gender critical people and
yeah, I'm just
homophobic
immediately thinking
scholars.
Catholics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Folk are good, right?
Yeah.
Folks tend to be good. Give them a bit too much money, and they'll try and keep a hold of that money, and they'll do that by stoking bigotry.
Yeah, and it's the reason that I am so, because occasionally, like, especially if you're a straight white guy who looks like me, occasionally you'll get people to shit test you and, like, like, why are you defending these people? And the reason is fundamentally, number one, it's the right fucking thing to do, just as a basic moral thing. But two, at a very pragmatic level, the second that you allow the working class to be divided along any lines by the reactionaries, you have lost. Like, they will, once that avalanche of it's okay to sacrifice this one group of people to get this thing that we want, like healthcare in the US as an example. We'll give you healthcare. You just gotta let go of this transgender thing. There's a whole fucking march about it recently. The second you give into that, well, now they know you're willing to make concessions. Now they're gonna come after you via like critical race theory, and now you just have to not. You're not allowed to teach letter from a Birmingham jail in public school anymore, and on and on and on, and it never stops until the only people that are allowed to exist in your society fucking look like me, and that's not okay. So you got to stop it right where it starts, which is the first books the Nazis burned were from a guy, like you said, who was studying transgender, like the first academic work on the subject being done. You got to stop it there.
Yeah. I mean, I like the analogy of the dive bar, which is, I don't know if you or your listeners have heard this before. So
No, I'm not familiar.
you head into, or the parable of the dive bar, I guess, to keep it in that religious framing. Heading down to an old dive bar, a friend of mine, pulled up and sat down to have a beer after work. And the bartender there, famously taciturn, grumpy, shitty, none of that. It's the kind of place that has lino on the floor and about up to chest level, so that after the night's drinking, you can hose it down because that's what you need. They're playing crummy music over the radio, or over the speakers. The beer is fine, and the bartender is a grumpy piece of shit, right? He's, he'll never crack a smile. He's not the kind who'll chat about how your day's going or whatever. It's a dive bar, so all comers are there. You got your rough, tough bikers up the back. You've got your, whatever it is going. And a dude walks in wearing a leather vest, pulls up kind of next to my mate at the bar, and orders a drink. And the bartender tells him, "You're not welcome here. Go away." And the guy's like, "Mate, I'm just here for a drink. I just want to sit down and have a drink." And the bartender reaches under the bar, picks up a friggin' cudgel and says, "You're going to leave now. You're kind of unwelcome here." The guy, huffs and puffs, but he leaves. The bartender sees my mate's surprised expression and says to him, "Oh, did you not see the swastika on his chest? As soon as you let one of them fuckers in, any second now, the place will be crawling with those Nazi fucks. Got to nip them in the bud." That's what they do. They send in one all polite, not like just showing who they are. They'll order a drink and sit down, and then it'll be 2, and then it'll be 4, and then it'll be 20, and then the whole bar is a Nazi bar. Yeah. This isn't a fucking Nazi bar.
Yeah, that's kind of there's something similar in the punk scene where it's if a Nazi gets into if you got a Nazi in a fight at a punk show and you're the bouncer at that show, it doesn't matter who started that fight. You kick the fucking Nazi out.
Absolutely.
Nazi
punks, fuck off.
Yeah.
That's, I should be clear. That's a parable. It's not something that happened to a mate of mine. Right, it's something I think I read on friggin' Tumblr of all things. But I think it's a useful analogy for thinking about how fascism rises, because it's one dude who's very polite, and then it's 2, and then it's 20, and then before you know it.
Yeah. Well, that happened. That's what. Actually, this might be like a good spot to jump into your new project here, because that's hitting all of my like Gamergate alarm bells and like the the basically just the fascism on the internet is one long elaboration on that bar story you just told. So, why don't you tell everybody kind of the rough outline of what this new awesome thing you're working on is?
So this is a project that has been mulling around my brain for some time. This is about how all of the apocalypses we've been through, the physical, military, financial, and social apocalypses, have helped drive fascism up in popularity and consideration to the point where something like January 6th could happen in the US. I'm looking pretty particularly at the US for this one because the US is a cultural hegemon that drives all of the Anglosphere world, really. You know, um, the reason something like Brexit could happen in the UK is because something like Trump could happen in the US.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's American cultural imperialism, pure and simple. The project is called All the Apocalypses, and it starts in 1989, looking at the fall of the enemy. At long last, the Cold War is done. Berlin Wall comes down, and Francis Fukuyama, in his hubris, announces it's the end of history.
Yeah.
And then you
That
have the
worked out.
90s.
Yeah.
Oh, that worked out so well. Now, we should be clear. When I'm saying, when Francis is saying the end of history, what he's saying is ideologically, liberal capitalist democracy, or rather social and economic liberalism, have won.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only good idea for governance.
Mm-hmm.
He's wrong. Economic liberalism is bad, actually. Social liberalism is a lovely concept, but because it's applied through economic liberalism, it can never be achieved.
Yeah.
And that's the core contradiction at the heart of liberal society. So we go from the fall of the Berlin Wall through the 90s. The 90s were the 90s. Peace on earth for all mankind, except for all the wars that America did and all of the genocides that America funded and all of the wars that America funded.
Yeah. Except for all of that.
Perfectly peaceful.
Yeah.
And then you tick around 2001, September 11th happens, and the end of history has ended. It is clear from the first speech that Bush gives to Congress on the 20th of September that that we are no longer living in a liberal society, that we need to move away from a liberal society towards an authoritarian one, towards an autocratic one almost, in order to attack what he terms as, the axis of evil in the in the very next speech he gives to Congress. The axis of evil speech, which likens people like the Taliban to Al Qaeda to the USSR to the to the fascist kind of to the fascism of Germany and Italy. It's nonsense because they are while they are all authoritarian ideologies, they are wildly different ideologies as they apply those authoritarian tendencies. So we move from 9/11's totalitarianism to very rapidly thereafter the global financial crisis. And in this project, I had the great pleasure of interviewing a number of amazing people. Elizabeth Sandifer, who wrote Neo-Reaction, a Basilisk, literally the book on the alt-right. And she's an amazing author, an amazing person, really. Very excited to get to work with her. FD Signifier, who has exploded into like white BreadTube by pointing out how fucking white we all are.
Yeah. No, that was an excellent video. Like, all his stuff is great.
He's also just, I mean, you know, I may be biased, but anyone who's a teacher approaching this stuff is amazing, and he approaches everything from a sociological and a very like inclusive standpoint.
We stand.
We stand. And Ian Danskin, who wrote the playbook on the alt-right. So I've got, three amazing analysts and thought leaders in this chipping in. But Elizabeth Sandifer points out that the global financial crisis robbed an entire generation of their future. My generation. Yeah. And that drives people one of two ways, right?
Yeah.
Either you go towards, okay, well, fuck this capitalism thing. That's where I went. Or you go, well, fuck this banking system, by which, of course, you mean what fascists always mean by that. And you run into authoritarian fascism, I should say. Fascism grows in times of economic, social, and political instability. And we have had increasing iterations of that between 9/11, global financial crisis, the racist response to Obama in the Tea Party, the misogynist response to nothing that
the
was
women
ripped
existing.
Up. The women existing, which we see in Gamergate, the rise of Chan culture, and it all starts snowballing, right? From the moment of 9/11 happening, you see, a number of years later, this happens. Then 2 years later, this happens. So it's, what is it? Like 2001, so 6 years later, the financial crisis. Then 2 years later, the Tea Party. Then a year later, we start seeing Chan exploding, the Chan culture exploding. Then a year later, we see the Sarkeesian effect. And then 6 months after that, it's the explosion of the Quinspiracy and Gamergate. And then it's all just out of control. There is no fix. There is no halting this train of abject destruction. And from about 2012, scholars were trying to locate what the authoritarian platform, what the fascist platform, the Republican Party would run on. They had everything they needed, an enemy in the Middle East. They had the economic crisis, so there is an enemy at home. You had the fear around migrants, whatever, that apparently Americans are scared of. I say as if my government isn't super proud of stopping the boats. You had all of the ingredients, but what they lacked was a demagogue, a convincing, charismatic person who could drive them from their misery into combat, into the life as eternal warfare. And then you got Trump, and it's a fait fucking accompli.
Well, I've often said that the key ingredient like what you're missing to turn an American conservative into a full-on fascist is basically all you have to do is introduce them to reality. And what I mean by that is American conservatism is it's got chauvinism, it's got imperialism baked into it, it's got racism, it's got everything that fascism has. The only thing that it has the foundational myth of America where like the American founders are treated like gods. The only thing that it doesn't have is the humiliation arc. The we have been degraded. We used to be great, but now we are not because conservatism runs on American exceptionalism. The
Mhm.
second, but the thing is, all of that's bullshit, right? Like America's a shitty country.
Oh yeah.
This all you have to do is to get a conservative to be a fascist is to convince them of the reality of their situation without changing any of their other reference frames. And you instantly have a fascist.
Yes, exactly. And what changed between the George W. Bush like kind of conservatism, which was already in the authoritarian vein, already not as conservative as pre-Reagan conservatives were, and Trump is the world changed, and the world changed as a result of the actions of conservatives uh, and liberals alike. Uh, the Obama's presidency was reacted against negatively on the right, basically because of racism. But it was also shit, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well, I mean,
the
Obama was a conservative president. He like
super conservative.
yeah, he was indistinguishable from Mitt Romney at a policy level other than his opinion on gay marriage and abortion. Like just everything else
Exactly.
was he was a
That's
Mitt Romney Republican.
well, I think a better way of framing that is not even Mitt Romney. He was indistinguishable from Reagan in his
Yeah.
policy stances.
So something that I
Um,
have my favorite, like if you ever want to be a troll in America, is this will get you into a fight no matter where you're at, is to say Barack Obama is the best politician that America has produced since Ronald Reagan. And that will instantly get you into a
that's
fight with
abundantly
anybody,
true.
for, but it's also true.
But yeah, it is. So while the conservative reaction to Obama was um, basically just racism, like
Yeah, yeah.
you know the the there is a legitimate criticism of Obama, which is that he is basically in in terms of like in terms of his ideological stances, his policy stances, he is just fucking Ronald Reagan, and it's so to create a kind of reasonable competitor to that stance, um, and the outcomes of that stance, which is, the world is crumbling. Capitalism officially died. We could call time of death for capitalism in the heyday of the global financial crisis. That was when the system's central operations had carked it. And yet it didn't die. And that's the point at which you see this massive wedge of radicalization start to explode in both directions, both to the left and to the right. I went left. I think anyone with a sense of critical understanding of the world went left. And I think we can convince plenty of people who still hung out in the middle to hang out left as well, because the fact of the matter is clear, right? Like, we've got fucking Bezos burning however much money to fuel his rocket dreams to just, go on a very high aeroplane flight. Good work, Jeffrey. Musk is. These people have too much money and they are idiots. Um, Now, there is a big reveal that's in my video that I'm holding that I've been holding back, which is one of Elon Musk's PayPal buddies. The guy is named Peter Thiel.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And between Peter Thiel and Robert Mercer,
Yeah.
these two tech bro billionaires, but especially Peter Thiel, and especially now in the post-Trump Republican Party, Peter Thiel he crops up everywhere in ways that are astonishing and terrifying and fascinating. But his beliefs hang out in the neo-reaction ideology of absolute weirdos, like a guy named Curtis Yarvin or Mencius Moldbug, a guy named Vox Day, who was like big in the Gamergate days. But it's filtered out from them. It's filtered out from them through weird neo-reactionary mouthpieces. People like Carl of Swindon, and sorry, I should clarify. People like Carl Benjamin, the dickhead formerly known as Sargon of Akkad.
Yeah.
People like what's his name, the based lawyer. All of these fascists, right? All of these authoritarian mindsets, given a chance at authority, have taken on this particular philosophy that is filtered through the cultural ethos, driven into the Chan culture dweebs that they both predate on and support, and produced a new kind of American fascism. And like even Carl of Swindon is a fucking American fascist. He's not British, not really. It's just an affect. Like his ideology is centrally American, and it's an American fascism. And it's all come out of these weird reactionaries that people like Peter Thiel, Robert Mercer, the Koch brothers, all believe deeply in their heart of hearts and direct the populace that they can direct.
And in many instances, actively fund.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Koch brothers and the Wilkes whatevers fund people like Shapiro, Rubin, Prager. Like, there is a concerted effort from big money to try and shift things. And then you have, these weirdos on the notional left, people like Coffin, people like Maupin, people like the Grey Zone, Jimmy Dore, who like Greenwald, who think that Abigail Thorne is CIA funded or MI6 funded, that I'm I'm receiving dollars from nobody.
Yeah. I actually, so I have a kind of like a on again, off again semi-debate with a friend of mine about Peter Thiel, which unfortunately with Thiel, like there are mountains of anecdotal evidence that he's directly funding a lot of fascists. The receipts are not yet forthcoming. The people that have them are keeping them very close to their chest. And I think that's probably for the best until we can actually nail him to the wall. But my friend is of the mind that Peter Thiel is motivated purely by being a troll, whereas I think he's a intentional right-wing authoritarian. And I listening to you talk just now and over the past several minutes, it occurs to me that the way that fascism has evolved and what it has turned into, and particularly the American brand of it, there might not be a distinction between those two things in actuality. Like modern American fascism is enmeshed with whatever it is that animates trolls. Like they might be like they're two of the same, right? They're cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, as soon as you said, like, my friend thinks he might just be a troll, your listeners won't have heard this, but I just shrugged because it's like, what's the fucking difference? Because the same goes for Trump, right?
Yeah.
Trump is not a actual fascist. I don't think Trump believes in fucking anything, but he's a troll.
That's my cat. Yeah.
Agreeing with
Harvey
me.
will. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's the ideology that animates Trump is not actual fascism, except it is.
Yes, Harvey. It is.
He's a troll. He exists to trigger the libs. And the difference between, an American-style fascism and a troll who is just out there to trigger the libs is nothing. Like, some people will say is something, some small belief or some intent. No, it's not. The triggering the libs, the reason that they only ever trigger the libs when it is so much easier and so much more funny to trigger a conservative, to trigger a fascist, is because they're fascists too. They're fascists too, right? Like it's not even like something to equivocate about.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, while you were talking earlier, and specifically about 9/11, and I'm really excited for this new video. I really want to watch it, and I encourage everybody who's listening to this to subscribe to your channel and click the little alert button so they know when it comes out, because I'm looking forward to it.
Smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell.
Yeah, but
I hate it. I hate the YouTube it gets.
Yeah, I'm going to put my little like and subscribe graphic on the screen just as we say that. But I'm thinking now about 9/11 and just that moment in history. And that was a moment where there are two very broad but very clear paths that we could have taken, Americans could have taken, and broadly the Western, like Anglosphere, but specifically America. And one of those paths was it began with a really like come to Jesus, like we have to think about, like fuck Osama bin Laden, fuck Al Qaeda, fuck, I'm not a big fan of Wahhabism, right? But like we can look at what makes a group of people want to do something like that. And there are reasons, and they said what those reasons were. And I'm not going to agree with those people, right? If I lived next door to the Taliban, I would probably die fighting them, right? Like they're not good people, but they had a point. And the point was that America has overextended itself imperially, and there are consequences to that. And we are the bad guys. And they might be too, but we're the bigger bad guys. And we need to do some soul searching about that and figure out what the fuck we've been doing since World War II. And that comes with a lot. Yeah. And if we had gone down that path, the world would be very different. And the alternative to that is to double down. And we're in the world where we doubled down. And that's not a good world to be in.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's in May of 2001, George W. Bush, as part of his foreign policy mandate, handed over 43 million US dollars to the Taliban, who he knew were closely tied to Al Qaeda, because everybody fucking knew. Everyone in the intelligence community at the time knew. And in fact, everyone in the intelligence community was aware that an attack on America was coming. He handed over $43 million as an outright grant to try and overthrow opium production in Afghanistan. it's the war on drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
He spent
Yeah.
$43 million funding the Taliban and therefore indirectly funding Al-Qaeda in May of 2001.
Yeah. Speaking of authoritarian control over bodily autonomy, the war on drugs is another. That's probably the next. It's basically just anything that you can put in your body that's fun. They are
Yeah,
going to weaponize, be it
that's
a
true.
substance or a person.
Whether it's a dildo, a vibrator, a cock, or marijuanas,
Yeah.
um, it's an attempt to just control yourself, like your ability to be the selfhood. And look, I don't think people should be taking black tar heroin, if I'm honest. But also, you don't take fucking heroin unless life is pretty fucking shit.
Yeah.
You say, yeah, we went one way in 2001 with there was a choice there, right? And we knew, the world knew, Five Eyes knew, and especially America knew that a terrorist attack on American land was imminent in some way. We didn't know what it would be. I'm not a fucking conspiracist. While I do at some point in this video say that George Bush is responsible for 9/11, it's George Bush Sr., not
Mhm.
George Bush Jr., and it's through foreign policy crap.
Right.
But, the American imperialist machine was what was being responded to. A good way of thinking about it is in the way that, like, the IRA responded to the UK and the English, specifically the English, imperialist machine. Because, likewise, I don't think I'm really on board with car bombings and the terrorist activity of the IRA in terms of how it hit civilians. But they were, responding to legitimate evil in big ways. And that's sometimes, in responding to legitimate evil, the outcome is a little bit evil. Even if you go to, like, the French resistance movement, who attacked plenty of civilians, who murdered plenty of civilians, they were Nazi civilians, but they were still civilians. They were terrorists, and I'm not sure how on board I am with their actions, but again, they were fighting something that was unequivocally evil. And likewise, Al-Qaeda was fighting something unequivocally evil.
Yeah.
I don't agree with what they did. I don't
Yeah.
think you should fucking...
Yeah.
I don't think you should murder civilians. I think that there are better targets to hit than civilians in any conflict. It's just that's the brutality of it all.
I mean, just to be like realpolitik with it, I mean, we imperialism breeds terrorism, just period.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have a term for it in, like, the State Department and the CIA circles. It's called blowback. Like, they know that it happens. And the question is, how do you like, you're doing an imperialism, be it militarily, be it economically, which is now our favorite method of doing it, be it however you want to do it. We're doing an imperialism. We know that the response to that is going to be some type of terrorism, because that's what happens when you do that. The question then is, how do you respond to that? And if you have a soul, the answer to that question is you stop doing an imperialism. And if you don't care, then the answer is you do imperialism harder.
You do something that's like, I don't know, you focus on this axis of theoretical evil around the world, and you launch a war on an idea? On terrorism as an excuse to reinvade Iraq, on false pretenses of weapons of mass destruction. That. So yes, as you said, there was a choice to be made there, and America made the wrong choice. Unabashedly so, right? The war on terror was a mistake. And then it was perpetuated. It was perpetuated through all of Bush's presidency, through all of Obama's presidency, and the rhetoric, the political rhetoric that was developed around it is exactly what got Trump elected, right? The outcomes of the Iraq War is ISIS. Like, that's not even a little bit up in the, up for questioning. So the outcomes of the imperialist action, got the outcomes of the imperialist action is what shifted us so far towards this American-style fascism straight away and so quickly. But it doesn't do the fascism at home thing at that point, right? So you've got the rah-rah America and you go and do imperialism, but it doesn't bring the imperialism home. Foucault's boomerang hasn't returned yet. But the financial crisis destroyed the future. No longer do we have the end of history, we have the end of the future.
Yeah.
And that's what brings it home.
Yeah.
That's what cements it in the minds of, the Pepes and the like nascent online troll culture. It's what brings this sense of we are the greatest nation on earth, and yet I cannot in my lifetime own a house.
Yeah.
And it sits it at home, and that contradiction requires you to either critically reflect or react. And plenty of people reacted.
Yeah, it's and I try, like, publicly, like in interviews and online, I try not to be a doomer about the whole thing, because I think we need to approach the world with or approach this with like solution oriented mindset and positivity. It's hard sometimes to do that, but but I think it's important to have a realistic assessment of the challenges you're facing and then say, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to not try for a better world? Right? Like, I feel like if you understand the situation enough to be um, a doomer about it, then you have enough of an understanding about it to also have sort of a quasi moral imposition on you to try to make it better, in whatever way is available to you, like be it online activism, be it in-person activism, be it joining a union, be it whatever you're capable of. Do the thing.
Here's the thing that is my response to the doomer instincts that I have, because I am fucking terrified. Climate change is, we've got 5 years left, right? Then the world
it's not good.
Yesterday, a storm ripped through the capital of Australia to such an extent that it wiped out power for most houses and destroyed the house I am in right now, like destroyed parts of this house. And the frequency, the dramatic damage of these storms is because of climate change accelerating. Like, we know this. The world is out of time, and that is terrifying. Fascism is on the rise, and that is terrifying. But critically, fascism fails. Capitalism falls to fascism, and then it fails. We are at a point right now where we have seen the world's largest socio-political hegemony try fascism and fail. It didn't succeed. It had some big wins, but it did fail to liberalism, which will fall back to fascism soon. But we know this. All of your viewers know this. All of your viewers' friends know this. Everyone who has an ounce of reflection in them can see that capitalism has failed and authoritarianism has failed. And that leaves communism. That leaves our socialist utopia. And that is so abundantly clear. It is so clear as to be frankly ridiculous to assume that anything else will happen. So the question is no longer, how do we make sure that, communism, or how do we make sure that progressive ideas are the ones at the forefront? We don't need to. They are. How do we get there? Like, what do we do? What's the next tangible step? Is it joining a union? Cool. Like, join a union. The IWW is, the Industrial Workers of the World is a great place to start. The one here in Australia does a lot of action, not as a union body, but across unions, coordinating unions and reacting to, responding to shitty attempts by our government to remove workers and human rights. Join your workers' union. That does an amazing job as well. But more importantly, if you're a renter, join a renters' union.
Mm-hmm.
Because the next big step, I think, in terms of capital resistance, is recognizing that the right to a home, the right to shelter, is a human right.
Mm-hmm.
And if capital can't accept that by nature of its authoritarian stance, that's okay. Because people, the power of a democratic society enacting its people's voice, can claim that instead. And that's through a renters' union. That's through rent strikes. That's through refusing evictions. But that can't happen just you on your own, right?
Right.
Gone are the days where your homestead on stolen Indigenous land can be protected by you and your spouse from the government agents coming out. That's not the case anymore. You need to work as a community. You need to work together. And that's why you join your renters union. If you are a homeowner, try and break that homeowners association. It's just another tool of authoritarian fucking control. And there are endless ways to do so. Call a meeting over everything, every little thing, require a quorum until the other uptight prigs of a society in your homeowners association just give up.
Yeah.
Right? I've been in residents association. We don't have HOAs in Australia. We have community-based residents associations, and a lot of them are reactionary fuckheads. But if you just call them in to do every little task, people are parking on this particular part of the street, and I need you to write the letters to the government to get something done about it. If you do that for every little thing, people are leaving their wheelie bins out. We need to get on top of this. Every little thing, every tiny little thing, if you give that to the authoritarian mindset in the organization, they crumble eventually. They run out of energy and they stop. They yield.
A friend of mine was reading a book that it was a used book, and it was about that, like how to unmake your HOA, and somebody had written in the margins, "Kill the HOA in your head." It was just wonderful.
That's exactly it. So yeah, while there are a lot of things to worry about legitimately, the future is just so abundantly clearly not going to be the hellscape that inaction would lead it to be, because there is so much to be done. Even just becoming part of your community in your neighborhood does an enormous amount of action directly against the individuating nature of neoliberal society.
Yeah, like get out, just get to know your neighbors. Like if there's a farmer's market or something in your area, like go meet the people that are that you live next to, right? And
fight
and it
against that
doesn't have,
alienation in
yeah,
just meeting people, getting to know people.
yeah, like you should get a list of people in your community that you can call if something bad happens to you and the police are not going to help you, which they're not going to. Um, like that is like the basis of any civilization that we build that comes out of the ashes of this one that we're presently seeing the expiration of is going to be based on a bottom-up community-led movement. And however you interface with that, be it unions, be it um, providing against food scarcity, like say the food not bombs or something like that in your area,
Community
like just,
gardening, right?
yeah,
Like,
community gardening, yeah, just
uh,
figure out a way to get involved with your community in a way that is meaningful to you. That's the
so
important bit.
I said yesterday, like a massive storm tore through the place where I live. It tore through all of Canberra, and especially the north. And the response that that we took here was, we took care of ourselves. We made sure that the roof wasn't collapsing in, and then we called around. We checked on our neighbours. We made sure because, emergency services have been systemically underfunded for however long. They're going to take forever to get there. Whatever. We have candles. We have flashlights. We have tarps. We can do something here and now in the community to make sure that we are taken care of. That we as a community and our neighbours and our friends are safe. There's an issue, which is the bystander effect. I speak about this in my New Year's video, where we assume we've been trained. Let's be honest. We've been trained by the society that we live in to assume that someone will take care of whatever it is. See a fire in the distance? Oh, someone's already called that in. Someone's responsible for dealing with that. Hear an alarm going off in a house. Oh, someone's already called the fascist street thugs, the police, to deal with that. See a person pulled over by the side of the road. Oh, they'll be fine, right? They've called whoever they need to call. It's bullshit, right? It's learned kind of. It's not even learned helplessness. It's learned apathy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we've learned across the board. So the counter to that is to understand that it exists. There is an impetus that has been inculcated in us that says someone will take care of that. And they won't, right? Like when you're learning first aid skills, one of the first things they tell you is about this bystander effect. Go and check on the person because they probably need help, right? Nobody else likely has. If you if you're telling someone to call for an ambulance, you need to choose specifically. You work in like ER work, right? You said
I was a paramedic for 7 years, and
well, there
I
we
worked in an
go.
ambulance.
Right?
And I just like within the past 3 months started working in the ER. Um,
Amazing.
uh, Mainly, there's a lot of various reasons I quit working as a street medic, but the combination of COVID and having to work very closely with uh, law enforcement were
Yeah.
just I could no longer bear the stress of both of those. Um,
Yeah, I mean, especially because you'll catch COVID from the anti-vax law enforcement.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was talking to a cop like not too long ago, and he was like not wearing a mask, and which they never do. And he was like, "Yeah, I hear you guys are really busy." I was like, "Yeah, we're really busy." He was like, "Yeah, like we've lost a bunch of people who've quit," and I was like, "Good." And then he stopped talking to me, which was great, which was great because I didn't
Perfect.
have to. Yeah,
But yeah,
that was towards the end of my career when I was a little burnt.
like so the bystander effect, I think
Yeah,
is a really useful framework just to keep in mind that like there is no one who's going to save us.
yeah.
Our leaders, our governments have proven to us time and time again that they're not going to fucking save us. They're out for them. They've chosen to act in the way that they have. If you see someone, this is something that I do personally. So, I drive around I was about to use an Australianism. I drive around in my ute, which is what Americans would term a pickup truck.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a utility vehicle.
Okay.
Ute, because Australia, mate. I drive around most of the time in my ute, and if someone's buggered up and pulled over by the side of the road, I usually have whatever they need in the ute,
Mm-hmm.
or have easy access to it somehow or other to help them out, even if that's a jump start, even if it's refilling their coolant, because if they call their insurance provider, it'll cost them the earth. It'll take them, however long to arrive, and you get stranded by the side of the road. Fuck that. I'll give them a bottle of water and I'll fix them up.
Yeah.
That's something anyone can do, though, right? You don't need to be driving around in a fully kitted out vehicle. Just stop and ask if they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've been stranded by the side of the road before because my ute is about 20-something years old and is sitting on 400,000 kilometers, which is like 200, I don't know, miles.
Thereabouts,
a lot of miles. It's driven a lot.
Yeah.
I've been stranded by the side of the road, and
220.
nobody stops. People assume that either I can take care of myself, or that it's not necessary, or that someone's already on their way, or whatever. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And what does stopping to check cost you? Say you're driving, from home to work, and you see someone over by the side of the road who's got a car problem. Well, it costs you, what, a minute to check in? Might cost you a bit more time if it's a bit more serious, but we've learned not to do that. And I think that's tragic.
Yeah.
When we're in a community and, the house next door catches fire, do you go over to check on them? Do you go over to help them out? Or do you assume that they've called the fire brigades to come and go and check? Go and make sure that they're okay. And if you can keep that in mind, keep in mind that bystander effect every time you see something that's like, oh, that's not right, then you will be moving towards changing the world in a positive way, right? Moving towards fixing things.
The worst thing that you're going to do is annoy somebody. And,
Exactly.
I'd rather take the chance of annoying somebody and maybe helping them than keep driving by somebody who needs help, right? Like that's,
Exactly.
I agree completely. I think that's just a very basic thing that I think if people can internalize that idea, it would get us very far. I know that there was one other thing that we wanted to talk about before we wrapped up, which is this new BreadTube 2.0 thing that you're working on. And
all right, so
I'm interested and excited to hear about this.
So I was a tiny channel. I started creating before the COVID lockdown as like a response to specifically the climate fires here in Australia. Massive bushfires at the start of 2020 before COVID had left. It had become big enough to worry about, in my mind at least. I got views in the scope of like 50 to 100 for basically the whole time I was creating, right up until I caught one of the one of the eyeball zoned people, that dang dad, on an online stream somewhere or other, or got to know him through I made one connection.
Yeah.
One point of like, oh, you're cool. And my channel exploded immediately. But I'm quite good at like seeking out connections. It's clear you are as well. You reach out and you get chatting to people and you make friends. Well, look, you caught me out of nowhere and I never heard of you. So, but you spoke to, it was Zoe, right? Was it Zoe B that you were?
No, Zoe's on my list of people to talk to. I've talked to quite a few people. I think we have several mutuals that I've talked to, like Aronach and um, Lua, and uh, yeah, I've been picking people off from
Fair.
the. I've got a long list of really dope people that I'm trying to get to return my calls,
Fair. You
and I got one here. So yeah.
yeah. Ah, adorable. Um, but yeah, like I'm relatively good at starting to make a connection,
Mhm.
but uh, not everyone is for a variety of reasons: temperament, neurodivergence, whatever. Like it can be paralyzing.
Yeah, for sure.
I got to chat to. I chatted to that dang dad. Then we made a video together, which was amazing. Beauty, two-parter, split between our two channels. Great time.
Oh, I didn't know that was a two-parter.
Yeah. So
Oh,
mine is about how it's all hierarchy, and Phil's is
yeah, it
all
was a
about
good
how
video. Yeah.
it was fun. Phil's is all about how gender and beauty like tie together in
Uh,
interesting ways.
okay.
It's
Yeah, I'll
really
have to check that out after the interview. I'll check that out.
yeah.
So
Um,
you made the video and
so yeah, Phil, I made a video. Phil made a video, and we collaborated and crossed over all through the process. And finally, I had views happening, and I got to work with someone I really admired.
mhm.
And then the very next video project I teed up was a collaboration with Kaylin Conrad, which is Bread and Roses. So I was talking about
Okay.
how Ronald Reagan basically killed the labor movement in the US while
Mhm.
Thatcher killed it in the UK.
Yeah.
Neoliberalism and the death of labor, while Kaylin was producing Bread and Roses, a dialogue about why you should join a union, why the union movements are good, actually. So I'm saying, here's why they're not as good as they used to be, and here's how we make them better. And from Kaylin's end, we were doing a dialogue about why we should just fucking join a union. God damn it. An enormous project, nearly killed the both of us, but amazing. And then, you know, Kaylin's a much bigger creator than that dang dad. And from there, while we were developing this, we were talking about how essentially this like up and coming BreadTube idea, this up and coming group of lefty creators, lives or dies based on the eyeball zone, right?
Mhm.
Mildred's eyeball zone,
Yeah. Yeah.
the thoughts line deal. And great, like I love that Mildred is doing that. Love that he's using platform to get the vibe out, get the word out. But it's centrally controlled. One person is deciding, uh, and
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
Lord Oculon is a plutocrat. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, it's my revolutionary purpose to destroy the eyeball zone. That's right, Mildred. I'm coming
Yeah.
for you.
Attack,
No.
attack, and attack and dethrone Oculon. Yeah.
um, but so Kaylin and I were talking about this, and it's like, all right, so we have all of these smaller creators and like distinctly smaller creators hovering around the ether, and we
Mhm.
don't know, we don't know each other really, and we don't talk to each other. We don't coordinate ideas in any way either.
Mhm.
So, if I'm creating this, then someone, and this was something that came up all the time. I'd write a video, and then John the Duncan would release that video that I had just written,
Yeah.
which I hadn't had a chance to record yet. It's like, damn it, John. Um, Without a chance to coordinate or cross over or talk to each other, there was just like, we're just voices in the
Mhm.
void. So I reached out to every creator I knew. I've managed to to crop up on a couple of charity streams with some bigger names, which has been really helpful for my like social networking. But a whole bunch of smaller names as well. So I reach out and I start chatting and I start pulling them together, and a whole bunch of organizers get involved. There's people like Xander Corvus, people like I mentioned John already. So we've got John, we've got Zoe B, we've got Aronok, we've got if I'd thought about this in advance, I'd have opened up my like list of friends. Actually, I've got it sitting here. Just like we've got an enormous quantity of the smaller, especially the smaller, but the up and coming like second push of BreadTube, kind of like FD Signifier was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, things have stalled out a little bit at the moment because, as with many community organizations, when you are organizing it, it takes a lot of like 1 or 2 or 3 people pushing to just get things rolling. And I had to pull back from getting things rolling while I finished off my master's degree because I needed to pay attention to that. But this year, in fact, this month, I am hoping to pull things back together to get things rolling anew, to get things like the code of conduct through, to get the organization operating on its own merits. It's a non-hierarchical collective organization. The leftist content creators, whatever, creative collective. I can't even remember what we called it. I started off calling it the leftist YouTubers collaborative collective for no reason other than I needed to call it something as we got going. My aim is to not lead this organization.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of really great union organizers, including some IWW and some sex workers mutual aid organizers who are involved in the project. And my aim is to get people who are better at organizing than I am to do that. All I can do is be charismatic and push things through. So if people want to be involved, I'm going to be pushing forward towards the second half of January to reopen people coming in and getting involved in this, because I think it's a really important thing to, have a space where we can share ideas and share work and find collaboration and commiseration, right? YouTube fucking sucks as a platform. So it'd be great if we could support each other to deal with that.
And anybody who's on that list of people that you're talking about, if you'd like to interview in long form, I'd be happy to talk to you. A stated goal of this channel is to create or help foster at least an ecosystem of collaboration among lefty people. So, and I think I know I've talked to John and Aronok and now you, but anybody out there who's I probably already have several of the people that are in that on my spreadsheet of people I want to talk to. But anybody who's in there, my DMs are open. Just hit me up and we'll figure out a time. FD Signifier does a really good job of like breaking down like what BreadTube was and like the genesis of it. And like most of what I think BreadTube like is like all the people that went to Lindsay Ellis's wedding, right? Like it was basically just this like clique of like 5 or 6 people that got really popular who were all friends, and that's great, right? Like I like most of those people to varying degrees, but it's it's its own little thing, and there are lefty creators who are varying degrees of like radical or who want to talk about different stuff. And I think it's really important to have like what you're trying to build, a space where folks can talk to each other and build like a community of support around this type of content, because God knows we don't have Peter Thiel or the Koch brothers funding us like, the other side does.
Look, I can tell you straight up, Peter, Peter Thiel, if you are watching this, hit me up and I will take your sponsorship.
Yeah, we will take the money.
It's, yeah, look, a good way of thinking about it is like almost like primitive accumulation versus collective growth, right? You've got a whole bunch of just a community doing their thing and a community of friends. It's Abigail and it's Lindsay and do. And sorry, it's Abigail Thorne and Harris Bomber Guy and Lindsay Ellis and
Yeah.
and they're just mates, right? They're just friends. They're just talking to each other because they're friends, or colleagues or collaborators in that like broad sense of the term. And some of them met on some of them met online, and some of them met before being online, and it doesn't matter. Like, they're just pals, and pals can produce community. I'm in a good community with my friends.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I want to stretch. I want to get a social organization happening in a way that, firstly, isn't Harker's like social organization. It's not mine. I don't want it to be mine. I want it to be a community. And that's what I'm trying to produce, which I need help with. So that'd be amazing. And it's a space specifically to disorder the power structures that, have led to a small group of people dominating the left-wing sphere on YouTube, who I like. Like, they make good stuff. But I want to make bigger stuff, and I want to push us towards a future that isn't this capitalist one as a society. Like, I want to help coordinate the media arm of the utopian future that we are bound to reach. And I think we need a space to coordinate the new media arm of the utopian future, and that's what I'm trying to get people to build with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I support that goal 100%, and I think everybody should sub to you and pay attention to that in the future and all the people that we've talked about. And there'll be links in the down there part, but I'm looking forward to it. I think that might be a good natural ending point and leave people hanging and waiting for more. Harker, do you want to plug your pluggables and
Sure thing.
tell everybody where to find you?
So I am Alex Harker. My channel is Harker the Storyteller. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/c/Harker the Storyteller. There are 2 mandatory videos for you to watch if you've listened this far into the podcast. Firstly, thank you so much for doing so. But the videos that you really ought to check out are the New Year's video that I just produced, where I essentially apologize for the big project not having come out yet. I'm sorry about that. It'll be out as soon as I can finish making it. But it's a New Year's toast, and it's a hope for the future. And I think it's worth spending some time looking at. The other one that thank you. It's called New Year's Revolutions, because I am a sucker for a pun. But beyond that, we've got the other video that I'm really proud of is TERF Fascism, which I recorded a little while ago, because the gender critical or the transphobia movement, especially emerging out of the UK, which is very heavily funded by American interests, is a fascist movement, and we need to treat it as such. We need to know that is the case. So if you want to check those ones out, there's some things to watch. You can find me on Twitter. I am at LT Harker. And if you want to give me money on Patreon, you can. Patreon.com/Harker the Storyteller is how you do that. But just getting involved in watching my stuff is a good enough move, honestly.
Yeah. Absolutely. And links to all that stuff will be in the show notes if you're on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, there should be a link in the description to the website where you can find all that, because there's a character limit on iTunes. Uh, so everybody go check that out. And Alex Harker, thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. And to everyone listening, stay safe out there.
All right. Hey there, folks. Mark Edwards here again, and I just want to thank you for watching or listening to the show, however you got the content. If you want to support the show, please go out and subscribe to my guest. Go subscribe to Harker's YouTube channel, subscribe to their Patreon, help them out, and that will be a personal favor to me that you can do. If you would like to support the show itself directly, then please consider subscribing to the Patreon. It is Patreon/UltravioletPod, and give whatever amount you think I deserve for making all this content and stuff and having the conversations with the peoples about the things. If you don't want to give a monthly amount, you can give me a one-time tip via Venmo or Coffee or PayPal. All of that is at UltravioletPod. If you are not in a situation where you can throw money at random YouTubers, either monthly or as a one-off, I totally get it. I've been in situations where I couldn't afford even $1 a month. I do not hold that against you, and I don't want your money, frankly, if you're in that situation. So please don't give it to me. Don't feel obligated to do that. However, you can still help me. You can help me by liking and subscribing to my show. Subscribe to me on YouTube, subscribe to the channel on iTunes, Spotify, any of the apps that you're on where you get the things, sub to me on there. Like my show, leave a 5-star review, leave a thumbs up, whatever method you can use to show that app that you like me. That helps me. It helps me immensely with the algorithm and getting the word out there. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. I think you can do that on Apple Podcasts as well, so that's really helpful. Anything that you can do to show the algorithm that I'm somebody worth paying attention to really does help, and I really do appreciate it. If you would like to share my content on social media, that is also incredibly helpful. You can find me on social media if you'd like to talk to me directly. I am on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. All of those are at UltravioletPod. I'm mostly active on Twitter. On Instagram, I occasionally post pictures of my cat, who you can hear in this past interview agreeing very strongly with Harker. And I'm pretty much completely inactive on Facebook other than putting uploads of when the videos come out. And I may actually delete my Facebook here shortly, I'm not sure. But until then, you can subscribe. Occasionally, I stream video games on Twitch, and that is at UVPod. So if you're interested in that, go hit me up. And yeah, I want to thank you again for listening and watching and taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk with cool people about awesome stuff. And I really appreciate it. So thank you. I will see you on the next one.